In the previous part of the video, we discussed what players need to know before they start playing HVH. In this video, we'll dive into the gameplay itself, specifically, what to know and do during the game. This video is primarily for beginners who have never encountered HVH but still want to start playing, which is why we strongly recommend watching the first part of the video, where we answer the most common questions about the basic aspects of HVH. Enjoy the video. To start playing, you first need to understand how cheat features and the cheat itself operate. First and foremost, let's talk about ESP, which allows you to see all enemies on the map. This does indeed give a significant advantage over honest players, but on HVH, it is primarily a strategic tool. Yes, you see the enemies, but they also see you, and this phenomenon fundamentally changes the gameplay. You need to consider the enemy's position, what they're doing, what weapon, and how much HP they have. You're supposed to plan your actions based on this information, keeping in mind that your moves are also visible to the enemy. This leads to the first and most basic rule of HVH. Make only those moves that bring you the maximum benefit. Every decision should be calculated and aimed at achieving the needed goal. On HVH, you need to constantly analyze everything that is happening around you. Understanding your surroundings is a fundamental skill on HVH. In this regard, HVH is similar to chess, where strategic planning is crucial. Grasping this concept already puts you a step ahead of most players. It's important not to just play mindlessly, but to analyze your mistakes and opportunities. It's difficult to give certain advice here, as the skill develops with your overall game experience. Next is the aimbot. Understanding how it works will help you gauge both your capabilities and those of your cheat. At first glance, it may seem that there's nothing complicated to it, and the cheat is just shooting all over the place. But no, there's a logic to everything that it's doing. Every weapon has spread. The faster you move, the bigger the spread. It's important to understand that when you shoot, the bullet travels to a random spot within that spread. Cheats can help control this phenomenon in two main ways. 1. No spread. This exploit removes the random weapon spread entirely, allowing running and gunning or even shooting while in midair. On Valve servers, this is limited to 2 to 3 shots, while on community servers, no spread can be entirely disabled. This is the reason why players mainly rely on the auto stop feature. 2. Auto stop. Just like in regular Counter-Strike, the best accuracy is achieved when standing still, so cheats generally have automated this game mechanic. Also, you can avoid having to think about this mechanic whatsoever. Auto stop quickly halts your character to provide optimal conditions for peeking enemies. It's important to remember that stopping takes a little time. While it might appear almost instantaneous to a human, for an enemy's aimbot, this delay is enough to get a shot off. This is why the auto stop settings have an early button that, when enabled, stops you in advance, minimizing the time an opponent has to fire. In practice, it's better to peek at opponents who are moving. The faster they're moving, the easier it is for you to shoot them since their spread will be at its maximum, making it difficult for them to hit you. Experienced players are aware of this and often stop in advance before peeking at an opponent. Now, let's talk about shooting. There are two features in cheats that significantly simplify HVH gameplay: auto-fire and auto-wall. These automated features always work without your input. Auto-wall scans walls to determine where and at what damage the aimbot can shoot through them. Auto-fire automatically shoots without requiring the player to press the left mouse button. To make these features operate properly, a minimum damage parameter is used. Min damage tells the aimbot at what minimum damage it should shoot at an enemy. Here's an example. If you place an opponent in front of you, an AWP would deal 437 damage to the head. But if the opponent is behind a wall, you might only be able to deal 40 damage. This feature ensures that the aimbot doesn't shoot too early when it isn't necessary. High min damage is usually set for low fire rate weapons like the AWP, Scout, or Revolver. Imagine you've taken a position, and an opponent peeks you. You hit them for 40 damage and end up getting killed. Attentive viewers might ask, what about players whose HP is lower than your minimum damage? The cheat accounts for this and automatically sets the minimum damage for such targets to a value equal to the enemy's HP. However, players often use binds to lower the minimum damage setting to shoot in situations where a lethal shot isn't possible. Such a bind is typically activated only in safe conditions. We'll discuss the bind system in the middle of the video. But for now, let's move on to the hit chance. We've previously talked about shooting and weapon spread, but how does the cheat know it will hit? This is where the hit chance setting comes in. Hit chance adjusts the accuracy of shots. It calculates possible bullet trajectories, taking into account the current weapon spread. The cheat then determines the ratio of successful shots to unsuccessful ones, and chooses an aim point where the chances of hitting is either equal to or higher than the value you set. At first glance, setting the hit chance to 100 and forgetting about it might seem logical, but it's actually a mistake. Raising hit chance to peak levels can introduce extra delays that might get you killed. Let's consider an example. Place an opponent in a certain position and ask them to press Ctrl. Then, approach from a different position with a minimum damage set to 100. As you can see, the cheat doesn't fire because, to deal lethal damage, it would need a headshot. However, in this position, there's no aim point with a 100% hit chance. That is, there isn't an opportunity to hit the enemy's head hitbox with this probability. This happens because weapons have a minimum spread that isn't 0, and the opponent's head is slightly hidden behind the upper part of the torso. So, in this example, a hit chance of no more than 52 is needed. It's important to note that different cheats implement hit chance differently, so the values mentioned here may vary in other cheats. The principle is the same. Experienced players know this and set the hit chance to suit specific weapons. For the SCAR, it's 40 to 60. For the Scout and AWP, it's 60 to 80. For the Revolver, it's 40 to 60. Generally, the lower the fire rate, the higher the cost of a missed shot, which is why slower weapons have higher hit chances. This logic applies to all weapons in the game. Regarding hitboxes, when configuring, you can specify which hitboxes the cheat is allowed to shoot at. You can even set it to shoot only at the legs if you want, but typically, all experienced players enable all hitboxes at this point. Let's illustrate this. We see an opponent with the center of the hitbox hidden behind a wall. If the aimbot doesn't scan additional points on the hitbox, known as multi-points, it will only calculate based on the center. In this case, a shot won't be possible since the bullet won't reach the target. However, when multi-points are enabled, the aimbot simulates bullet trajectories to find where it can deal more damage with greater accuracy. This helps in finding optimal points for shooting, as mentioned in the hit chance section. Multi-point also has an extra setting called Point Scale, which determines how far the points are from the hitbox center and closer to the edge. It's recommended to set this to Auto, as this mode considers weapon spread and avoids scanning points that don't meet the hit chance. Setting the point scale closer to 100 isn't always optimal, since various factors can affect accuracy. Tuning this parameter should be based on practical experience and testing. Next are anti-aims, or as honest players call them, Spinbot. As mentioned earlier, the aimbot tries to find the best aim point for a shot that will either be lethal or deal a lot of damage. It's no secret that higher damage is dealt to the head hitbox, so players mainly use anti-aims to hide vulnerable hitboxes from the enemy's aimbot. Let's demonstrate. Stand behind a wall and hide your head. When an enemy scout peeks, it won't see your head in this position and therefore won't be able to make a lethal shot. However, if you use a Spinbot or another funny anti-aim, your head will be available for the enemy's aimbot. It's better to use static anti-aims because dynamic anti-aims currently only make things worse. In HVH, you need to manage your local player model carefully. In open spaces, press Ctrl to hide the head hitbox, while in enclosed areas, position your head so that the enemy has to expose themselves more to shoot at it. This is why experienced players use pitch down, since other pitch settings make your head more accessible. Let's move on to some straightforward, practical tips. 1. Try to position yourself above your opponent. The higher you are, the more your hitbox is hidden behind your shoulders. 2. When crouching, also press the movement keys, left, right, forward, backward. This kind of swaying movement helps lower your head further. 3. In these situations, it's beneficial to place your head as close to the wall as possible. This makes the opponent start stopping much later. 4. Sometimes, it's better to peek with a backward anti-aim. Thing is, when using manual anti-aim, your body shifts relative to the center, which means an opponent with an AWP might be able to kill you much earlier. This is a situational tip that requires significant game experience. At the beginner stage, it's important to just be aware of this characteristic. Now that we understand what anti-aims are, how do we control them? There are two ways: freestanding and manual anti-aim. We'll focus on the manual one, as it is the most popular, and experienced players primarily use it. Manual anti-aim is a way to manually control your character's player model using a bind system. You can predefine how your model should be positioned when pressing a specific key. Most players use left and right manual binds. Let's set up such a bind. Open the menu, find the desired feature, right-click on it, specify the needed angle, and then set the mode to toggle, which means on/off. Now, we've made it so that pressing a key turns your head to the left. Next, create a bind to turn your head to the right. Follow the same process, but specify the opposite angle and choose a different key. That's it. You can configure any feature in the menu using this scheme. The only limit is your imagination. Most commonly, players bind the following features: third-person view, manual anti-aims, min damage, duck peek assist, and auto peek. Let's talk about these features. Duck peek assist is a feature that automatically raises the player model to the needed height. Unlike standard behavior, where releasing the crouch key makes the character fully stand up, this function allows them to rise just a little, for instance, by 1 unit. You have two options: either uncrouch manually to kill the opponent, or simply press the bind, and the cheat will automatically rise exactly when it's possible to deal the specified minimum damage. Quick Peek Assist is another feature that simplifies things. Similar to Duck Peek Assist, you could do this manually, but this specialized feature does it faster and more efficiently, as it works without delay. In practice, Auto Peek operates on a simple principle. The cheat will return you to the location where you activated this feature. There's a special indicator, usually a circle on the ground, for this. Auto Peek has two modes: returning to the starting auto peek position after you shoot, or after you release the movement keys. Experienced players typically use the on-shot mode. Regarding in-game applications, there are also two ways to utilize this. The first and most obvious way is to perform a quick peek at an opponent with a low min damage bind. This is often needed for low fire rate weapons like the Scout, AWP, and Revolver. For example, if you see an opponent and realize you can't immediately deal lethal damage, you need to simplify things for your cheat. Activate Auto Peek, lower the min damage, and nibble at the opponent. In many positions, the enemy won't be able to retaliate because the AWP deals higher damage through walls, whereas if you're shooting for 10 HP, a Scout wouldn't penetrate at all. After you've nibbled at the opponent, you can safely peek again for a lethal shot. Because you've reduced the enemy's HP, you can more safely peek them since you'll detect lethal damage earlier, allowing auto stop to activate in a slightly safer spot. With this approach, remember to quick peek only when the opponent can't fire back or when the damage you might take is significantly less than the damage you can deal. For instance, in a certain position, trying to peek with a Scout would be unwise because you'd only deal 10 damage, but an enemy with a Scar, due to higher fire rate, would hit you and kill you since being hit slows you down. The second way to use Auto Peek is in situations where 2 or more opponents want to peek at you. Let's illustrate this. You approach stairs, activate Auto Peek, and hold an angle. 2 opponents peek you. You kill one and instantly retreat in the very first millisecond after shooting. If you were to do this manually, the chances that the second opponent would get a shot off would be quite high. In such situations, it's best to use Auto Peek, as demonstrated. Let's move on to gameplay exploits that have a direct impact on the game. It's important to understand that some exploits come and go. so staying up to date with the latest developments and adapting is key. In the past, there was an exploit known as the Magic Bullet, which allowed players to shoot from 2 different locations simultaneously, from their position and from 0 coordinates on the map. This resulted in some areas being nearly inaccessible. Players passing by would be instantly killed. Currently, several exploits are active. Double Tap. This exploit allows firing 2 shots instantly with any weapon. When playing on servers where it's enabled, there are 2 things to consider. First, ensure your configuration is optimized for this exploit. Second, remember that Double Tap is enabled on whatever server you're playing on. The thing is, on normal servers, you could be caught off guard by weapons like the Scout, but not on the servers where this exploit is enabled. Accuracy Exploit. This cancels the accuracy penalties imposed by the game, such as after jumping or switching weapons. With this exploit, you can jump towards enemies and shoot instantly without suffering an accuracy reduction. Sub-Tick Airstrafe. While nerfed on Valve and some community servers, on servers with high air accelerate values, this exploit significantly changes the gameplay by enabling faster movement. In some cases, especially with other exploits, these can change gameplay drastically. While these exploits may not always be around, it's important to understand how they work and their potential impact on gameplay. It's also vital to keep up with new exploits that may emerge. Some features have been part of the scene as long as HVH itself, such as backtracking, which we've covered in a previous video. You can watch it via the pop-up notification. This feature significantly affects the gameplay, which is why it's important to understand how it works and what it affects. Simply put, it allows players to manipulate enemy positions in time. However, there is a time limit on how far back you can move an opponent's position. So cheats display a second model of the enemy that indicates the farthest they can be backtracked to. It's important to remember that this works both ways. Enemies can backtrack you as well. In gameplay, avoid making abrupt movements away from the enemy if you're within their backtracking window. In such cases, they'll target your backtracked model rather than your current one. This allows them to eliminate you safely. For experienced players, this isn't particularly risky, as they've learned to recognize situations where backtracking is likely. To demonstrate, let's compare a novice and an experienced player. You'll immediately see the difference in approach without needing any labels. Moving on from the RageBot topic, there are 2 more features to discuss: Delay Shot and Auto Scope. Regarding the Delay Shot feature, generally, you should just know that it allows the cheat to deal more damage by predicting future situations and aiming for higher potential damage. Whether to use it is a personal choice, and trying it out will help you decide. But the Auto Scope feature has become essential in the current HVH scene, allowing for quicker peeking with the SCAR or AWP. Shooting while scoped provides much better accuracy than without it, so the cheat automatically scopes in just before firing to maintain mobility for as long as possible. Let's show the difference between peeking with and without scoping. The improvement is obvious. For weapons like the SCAR, experienced players often bind a hotkey for minimal damage settings, like HP +1. This is helpful in situations where you'd rather hit once and kill the enemy instead of risking multiple shots. This bind is especially useful when peeking at direct angles, where landing a precise shot on a lethal opponent is advantageous. Consider the distance and your weapon's damage capabilities in such situations. We've covered the basics. Note that visual, miscellaneous, and skin settings weren't discussed, as they mainly affect aesthetics and don't significantly impact gameplay. If you're struggling with configurations, try using configs from the community market, available for free or purchase. Just remember to adjust your keybinds accordingly. Now, let's discuss in-game strategies. First, decide which mode you'll be playing and adjust your settings accordingly. We covered different modes in the previous part. For weapon selection in HVH, the community has already identified the best choices. For pistol rounds, use the revolver. When funds are low or if double tap is active, use the Scout. For standard gameplay, go with the SCAR. And for the most powerful weapon, choose the AWP. Using other weapons against cheaters is usually ineffective as they won't perform as well. The first step to mastering HVH is understanding maps, especially wallbang spots. As a beginner, you should at least know half of the wallbang locations on Mirage. Without this knowledge, you'll face frustration. We recommend checking out our playlist that covers popular wallbangs across various maps. We recommend that new players enable enemy tracers after watching the tutorial videos to see where shots are coming from. This will help you quickly memorize the positions from which you can be shot. In the early stages, it is also recommended to play from a single position to fully learn it. Understand where and how you can shoot through, and how to properly navigate a given position. Over time, expand your gameplay experience by taking and playing from new positions. The next trivial parameter is game experience. Mostly players gain it on community servers, so you need to play, and play again. At the initial stages, it is quite normal to die or not know the shots. It is important to learn, memorize game situations, and try to play better. From personal experience, we can say that players who have never played on HVH, with due diligence, begin to show a good level of play in about 2 to 3 weeks. What matters here is the player's personal desire and his ability to learn in games. It all depends on you. There are those who learn to play well in 3 days, and there are those who still haven't learned after years. That's why we can give you some tips that will make your way easier. 1. Try to analyze your game. It is necessary to do only those actions that are likely to benefit you. You should not mindlessly peek when it is impossible. 2. Observe other players, both during the game and through videos on YouTube. At the initial stage, try to repeat the actions of good players. Watch where and at what moment they take certain shots. 3. Stay flexible. The secret of success of a good HVH player is to be flexible and ready for different situations. A good player calculates in advance the actions of the opponent in this or that position and, based on this information, makes decisions. For example, you go to a position and notice that the enemy is not far from a position that will completely counter you. Therefore, it would be logical to change direction. Another example, your teammate picks up an AWP and dies. Thus, the AWP is reloading and will not be able to fire at you for some time, which is why you need to trade your teammate instantly so that his death is not in vain. In the current HVH, many players have the impression that success in the game depends on ping. Even the most inexperienced player can take an open position and just wait for opponents. This characteristic is related to the fact that throughout the history of CSGO, it was hard to imagine a situation where you couldn't safely peek an opponent. First due to fake lag, and then thanks to the defensive double tap that easily allowed peeking any opponent. Many players have literally not adjusted to the new mindset in the new game and the new HVH. Suppose you are up against an opponent with an AWP and a ping of 1 millisecond. You peek and die. This could have been easily predicted beforehand. The question is, why even peek at such an opponent if the outcome is obvious? This simple truth somehow doesn't settle in the minds of many players. In CS2, skill plays a much bigger role than in CSGO. First, because of the fewer random factors in the game. And second, because not everyone can kill a player with an AWP and a ping of 1 anymore. Ping should be considered an additional parameter that needs to be taken into account. You need to consider both your ping and the opponent's ping. For this purpose, in the ESP flag settings, there is an option to enable displaying the player's ping. Your task is to create situations where the ping is not so important. At the same time, it's important to know when and where you can safely peek at an opponent. When playing HVH, try to choose positions where you can peek using your left shoulder. This gives you an advantage. You'll see the opponent slightly earlier than they see you, except for straight angles. If you have to peek using your right shoulder and have full health, it's often better to do it manually. Take a body shot and then deliver a lethal counter shot. In cases where you have a weapon with a high movement speed, like a scout or deagle, and plan to peek at a straight angle where the opponent won't have time to shoot through the wall, hold the E key before peeking. This will disable anti-aim, straighten your player model, and help avoid hits to the legs, minimizing the chance of taking damage to them. To better understand peeking strategy, Keep the following scheme in mind. Each model has a so-called eye position, the point from which bullets are fired. In our diagram, this place will be marked with a red dot. In addition to this shooting position, each model also has a left and right edge. In our diagram, these will be marked with blue dots. The secret to a successful peek is to do it in such a way that your shooting position can see the edge of the opponent significantly earlier, without exposing yourself to the shooting line relative to the enemy's shot. Essentially, it's a simple understanding of geometry. This strategy works in reverse. You can take a position where your edge is less accessible to the enemy's shot position during their peek. Correct model placement will allow you to see the edge of the opponent's model before they notice yours. Such a list of micro tips could go on endlessly, so it's impossible to cover all the nuances in one video. However, we can confidently say that the information presented today will be critically important for any beginner who is about to learn HVH. We'll be waiting for your comments below this video. You might point out some important points we missed. Feel free to also share topics you'd like to learn about in future videos. Throughout this video, we've hidden several Easter eggs containing subscription activation codes, and we're starting a giveaway for all commenters. The rules are simple: like the video, subscribe to our channel, and leave a meaningful comment with your Neverlose username at the end of it. Thank you for watching. This has been the Neverlose team. Stay tuned for more insights in our upcoming videos.